Today's podcast episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. And if you'll go over and check them out, they are the #1 electronic health record system for counselors and therapists. They will provide everything you need to make your practice run smoothly and efficiently. And go check them out, TherapyNotes.com. And if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get your first 2 months free. TherapyNotes.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 131 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer. Glad you've joined me for the podcast. If this is your first time listening in, glad you've found us. Hope you'll come back for some more and subscribe to the podcast. If you are coming back for more, glad you're back. Hope you are enjoying the podcast and that it's helpful to you in your journey. That's why I do it, as trying to help people out and get some good information out to people and let you hear from some other interesting people and other therapists and their private practice journeys. So I hope that you're starting to get back to maybe a little bit of a sense of normalcy as we're still moving through this whole COVID-19 pandemic and all that's going on. I know as I'm recording this, there's just a lot of kind of disturbing stuff going on in the news, just in terms of the protests going on around the country and just some of the unrest that's going on, without getting political or anything like that. I just want to remind folks to, speak up for what is right, for what is good, and to treat each other with kindness and compassion. And that's the philosophy I try to live by. It's what I feel like my faith dictates for me to do. And, and so we've got to treat each other with respect, regardless of, the color of our skin, regardless of all of that. So I just want to say that, without going too deep into that. Although in today's episode, I've got Dr. LaRonda Starling joining me, and we're going to talk about self-care. And I got to know LaRonda again through online, and really have enjoyed getting to know her and learn about what she's doing. And we're going to talk about self-care. And I think that's always a great topic for those of us in helping professions. And so I'm looking forward to you getting to hear from LaRonda. The other thing I wanted to just kind of speak about just a minute is just thinking about our return going back into our offices. I know that for me in my practice, we had a staff meeting this past week, and we talked about what we wanted that to look like as far as going back to the office and starting to see clients face to face again. I know there are some practices out there that have continued to do that through the pandemic, and I hope that they've done it safely and responsibly and all that sort of thing. But, so just to let you know what I'm doing in my practice is that we are going to be sending out an email to our clients and really kind of giving them the option of whether they want to come in and meet with us face to face or continue with the telehealth. And I think, as I said early on, I thought that when we moved into this whole crisis that we've gone through in the last several months, that telehealth would start to become more of a norm. And I'm just hearing a lot of that from people. So we're giving our clients the option. We're having them wait in their cars until it's time for their appointment, and we will call or text them to let them know that we're ready to see them. We're going to meet them at the door so that they don't have to touch doorknobs and all that sort of thing. We've been trying to to kind of figure out whether we're going to take temperatures or not. And I don't know the correct answer to that just yet. But I think as much as anything, we all need to be thinking about our own safety and the safety of our clients primarily. Just thinking about what we can do to continue to hold off this pandemic as best we can. Again, we're not sure what's going to happen over the next several months, and hopefully there'll be a vaccine and we'll be able to start getting back to a sense of normalcy, whatever that might look like. So anyway, I know that's on a lot of people's minds, and I just wanted to say it all out loud in that, just thinking about the protests going on concerning George Floyd's death, which is just tragic and just uncalled for. So anyway, enough about that. One of the things I did want to remind you about is just to be able to check out the Session Note Helper, which is, again, a system I put together to help you with your progress notes and session notes. And I'm adding to that concept and that idea by there's also an intake form that's available that uses kind of the same workings, for lack of a better way to put it. And the Session Note Helper is just simply a system in which you use a Google form in conjunction with a Google Doc, using also an add-on called Form Publisher. And what I've done is put together a set of templates that you can use to get you started with that, and also teach you how to set it up for several different applications within your practice. I've mentioned on previous podcasts that I've got a Facebook group called G Suite for Therapists that I started, and I'm still just blown away by the number of people that have joined that group. It's now got over 700 members, which I just I think the Facebook algorithm gods have helped us out a little bit with that, and that it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in it. So I'm just getting new requests every single day for people wanting to join that group, and it's just a place for people to have discussions about how they're using the tools of Google G Suite. And if you're not familiar with that, again, I've got a whole course on how to use G Suite within your practice, and I'm in the process right now of diving in even deeper with that and going into specifics about how you can use those tools to set up systems and processes for your practice. So keep an eye and ear out for that. I hope to have a webinar here in the near future. The thing about it is just with all that's going on right now, I've had to, put my attention in a lot of different places. So you can get to all of those resources by going to practiceoftherapy.com. And if you, at the top of the homepage there's a button there that says Cool Resources, and that'll let you get to all the resources that I've got out there and try to keep adding to. And if you're interested in the Session Note Helper system, you can get to that by just going to the URL, just simply sessionnotehelper.com. And you should be able to find all of those resources there. So I'm looking forward to you hearing from Dr. LaRonda Starling and our conversation about about self-care, not healthcare, but we do talk about healthcare to some degree. But anyway, I'm looking forward to you getting to know her and all of that. So without further ado, here's my friend, Dr. LaRonda Starling. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so happy to have with me Dr. LaRonda Starling. And LaRonda, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And I was so happy to learn about LaRonda, and she's going to probably talk about this here in a little bit, just her book on self-care and spirituality as in terms of private practice practitioners and people that do this work. And so as I start with everyone, LaRonda, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and your private practice journey and how you've kind of landed where you're where you have landed. Sorry, I
Okay.
got tongue tied there. So,
It's okay. Happens to
yeah,
all of us.
yeah.
I am a licensed clinical psychologist, a licensed professional counselor, a national certified counselor, and I'm a professor and adjunct. I am an adjunct professor at a Christian university. See, it happens.
Uh-huh.
And so I have a private practice right now in Arlington, Texas. And so I do psychological assessments, I do counseling, I do some consultations with other professionals as needed. And so that's basically what I'm doing right now. I have been in private practice since 2013 because that's when I received my license for clinical psychology. And since then, I started off small with a group of other people. And then about 2017, I had my own office. And so that's where I am actually right now in Arlington,
Mm-hmm.
Texas.
Wow. Yeah. And so you do psychological testing, and what other sort of kind of people do you tend to work with?
I work with children, adolescents, I work with adults. And so those people mostly come to me through the insurance panels when they're calling us looking for a therapist. And then I also work with other agencies that will just call and say, okay, we need to work with you because we need some people who need to be tested. And so some of that work is from the state of Texas and a program called Texas Workforce Commission. It's
Mm-hmm.
Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehabilitation Services. So on their end, they're helping people find jobs. And for my part in that, I get to be able to, and I'm really grateful to have this opportunity because I feel like it helps the community. And so for my part, I get to do the psychological evaluations to let people know if they have a diagnosis of some kind. Some people already know, and so I'm just confirming it.
I see. I see. Yeah. And so, and you're in a solo practice, is that correct at this
Yes.
point? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I know one of the things that we had said we wanted to talk about, and I think this is just a really pertinent topic, just given kind of what we're going through, what we've been through, depending on when you're listening to this, in terms of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. I just feel like I don't know about you, LaRonda, but I'm getting kind of weary in a way. I think we've kind of gotten through that adrenaline rush of it all, and we're ready to just kind of get on with life. But I know one of the things that you've really addressed in your book and in other ways is just thinking about self-care. And so you want to say some more about that, just in terms of how maybe therapists neglect to take care of themselves and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think we do. And I think unfortunately, I think it's natural because we are caretakers and most of us, we got into this field because we are givers. And in being a giver, you have to sometimes take that time out to say, you know what, not right now. I'm just going to take this
Mm-hmm.
small time, even if it is a small time that you have to take care of yourself. And especially in private practice, because what I found is that if you work somewhere, you have people to do things for you. So you have someone to do the scheduling and to help you with billing and to greet your clients. And when you're in private practice, especially as a solo practitioner, you're all of those things. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is always a time when you can be doing some work. Even though I'm in my office right now, if I'm at home, I'm always thinking, oh, what can I do to kind of make next week work a little bit smoother for me? Well, I could probably do some paperwork ahead of time or just any number of things that you feel like you can do in terms of marketing. You can always just be doing something. And I think one of the things I learned while I was writing the book is titled Be Still, Spiritual Self-Care for Mental Health Professionals. And I think that first part is the most important part is sometimes we just have to be still. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that means to physically be still in terms of just not being so busy in your day and doing something that you actually want to or like to do and like a hobby or something, because of course we like
Mm-hmm.
to do therapy, and also to spiritually be still. And so that's what the book is about.
Right, right. Yeah. So what are some of the practices that you kind of recommend that people take part in terms of that self-care? Um, obviously we think of things like hobbies and doing things that are fun.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other things that you feel like are helpful to people?
From a spiritual point of view, I think one of the first things to be um, to be aware of is who God is as a person, because that's what I write in the book. If you know who God is, if you know that God is everywhere, if you know that he's all powerful, there's a lot of things that as private practice clinicians that are actually in charge of our business, we won't take so personally, because we know that there is someone that we can go to and we can lean on. We can lean on God for those things. And then, of course, prayer and being intentional about praying. A lot of times we don't pray until something bad happens or until we have a bad day, but just being intentional throughout the day, just to make that time to pray to God. One of the things I also talk about in the book is just being able to reflect on the good in life. There is a passage in the Bible that tells us to think about things that are good and pure. And in our world as mental health professionals, a lot of times, especially right now, it's hard to put a finger on, okay, what is good about this? You know, there's nothing good about a virus that's going around, and in a lot of ways is invisible because a lot of us can be asymptomatic, but then infect another person. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you are thinking about that, like, hey, what can I pull out of this that's actually good? Oh, I learned how to do teletherapy, which was me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a platform that I had to learn really quickly so that my clients could see me still, the ones that were afraid to come out. And for my students, we had to revamp one of the classes that we had for them a little bit to just tweak some things so they didn't have to have that face-to-face component. And so if you think about, you know, what's the good in that? Well, I practice the flexibility that I teach as a clinician.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of the other things, one of the things I talked about in the book was saying no, and being able to say no in a loving way, not only to other people when they ask you to do something when you feel overloaded or overwhelmed or overburdened, but also to yourself, to be able to say, you know, I could do these extra things, but today we're not going to. And I think a lot of times right now, some of our parents who are therapists who actually are having to homeschool their kids now, and you're not able to get up in that hour and say, hey, you know, everybody be still and get quiet and go and do your work, but they're having to do that now as stay-at-home working parents at the same time. And so I think that I've seen a lot of pictures where parents have put signs on the door that says, you know, if this is not an emergency, you know, give me until this time and I'll come out. And so just even having to have that boundary with their children is something that, you know, we can think about in terms of self-care right now, in terms of, I can only be a therapist right now in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you still are a parent. And then at the end, I do talk about what we typically think about self-care, because we still have to get enough sleep. We still have to eat enough. We still have to exercise, and we still have to take care of our bodies in a physical way, and also to surround ourselves with good people and good friends, and to be able to combine all those things with our spirituality practices.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think it's one of the things that I'm reminded of a there was a psychologist or therapist back I'm dating myself, back in the 1980s, who his name was John Bradshaw, and he wrote a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And one of the quotes in there that has just always stuck with me is to always remember that we're human beings, not human doings.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of times we can get caught up in just feeling like we've got to really push ourselves, like we've got to get out and strive and do all this stuff. But I think sometimes we do need to take that downtime, that Sabbath, to use that term, to be able to just care for ourselves. And I think one of the things that has happened for a lot of us, just through this season we're in with the COVID-19 and all of that, it's kind of forced us to do that to some degree. We've been forced to kind of change the way we do things, change our habits, and really, for many people, become very reflective about those things.
Absolutely, because it caused everybody for at least a month now to actually get somewhere and be still. And there's nowhere else most people are going except for if you have to go to work or go to the grocery store. But otherwise, you're being able to sit in the quiet where it's just your thoughts. And I think one of those things we do need to think about is how much we're being human beings and not human doings. I think that's a perfect way to say that, because in a lot of ways, when people are depending on you to fix things and you always are the fix-it person, it can start to feel like you're just human doing, and that you're not actually allowing yourself to be a real person.
Right.
For example, if you're having to calm somebody else's fears when all this first started, and you also are carrying your own fears about what's going on, that's perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think so many times with, especially with human emotion, it's not an either or proposition, but it's more of a both and that we can, it's perfectly reasonable for us to feel two things at once.
Right.
In terms of feeling anxiety around all that's going on, but at the same time feel compassion for others and feel, at peace about things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So,
that's, mhm.
yeah, no, go ahead. Uh-huh.
I was going to say, that's where once I was able to finish setting up the teletherapy and getting my students that were anxious calm, I just had to tell myself, it's okay right now if you want to just have a peaceful feeling, because for myself, I needed to be at peace, but also for my clients, I needed to be able to be at peace when I saw them. And so I think that's important.
Right. Right. Yeah. So what are some other things that you feel are important for people to think about in terms of self-care and, how they do that, particularly in the spaces that we work, and that I know a lot of times we get to hear some very heavy stuff from people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that, yeah. So what are your thoughts about that?
You know what I learned? I was working in a community counseling center when I was an intern, and a long time ago. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but one of the uh, supervisors that I had told me, he said, when you come in here, you're going to hear a lot of hard things. And he was right. And he said, just
Mm-hmm.
pretend you have a backpack. And when you come in here, you put that backpack on. And in that backpack, you're going to put all those people's burdens and all the stories and all the scary things you hear, all the hard things that are to hear. You're going to put it in that backpack. When you leave the door, you're not going to leave with that stuff. You're going to leave it right here. And so then when you come back, you can pick it up and then take it back into those rooms with you where it needs to be, the things that you
Mm-hmm.
need to remember to help your clients. And I've taken that to heart this whole time. I think that's a good way to take care of yourself, is to have a boundary with yourself and say, when I walk through this door, and I'm an intern and I'm somebody's therapist and I'm somebody's rock. And when I leave this place, I am still a rock for some people, because, you still have family and friends. But in terms of doing that all the time and always being turned on to the ability to know that, okay, I'm going to have to be a helper right now, it's okay to turn that off. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that if you think about our profession, there are some things we can't turn off. So once you learn how to active listen, it is really hard to turn that off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember being in the grocery store when I first learned how to do it, and I'm talking to somebody and I'm going, and the conversation did not stop.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. So there are some things that we've learned that we can't turn off, because it's just, having good listening skills is a really good thing to have. And so in so many ways, that as a private practice clinician, or just as a therapist in general, it is very important to say, there are some things that I can't turn off, so I'm just going to protect that right now. And I think you can protect that sometimes by going somewhere where you can be by yourself, undistracted by the things of the world. Even if you can't take a whole day, because some people can't take a whole day. If you can take an hour or 30 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how big your family is, and just take some time by yourself and just be able to reflect on what's going on with you and taking good care of you.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's also important to build into our schedules that self-care time. I know one of the times for me, and it's been a little bit disrupted with what we've been going through here lately, but usually I like to walk in the mornings, weather permitting, and that's a time when I listen to podcasts, do some reflection and meditation, and as you mentioned, prayer and that sort of thing. I think it's good that we have that built in to our daily lives,
Right.
to be able to do that and take on those practices. I'm also reminded of and this is a kind of an illustration or a metaphor that I use a lot with clients, is that one of the things that we as therapists want to do more than anything else is help others.
Right.
And what I'm always reminded of when we fly, when you get on a plane, the first thing they do before they take off is go through the safety routine about where the exits are and all of that. And they talk about the oxygen mask coming down in terms of, if the cabin were to lose pressure. And the thing that they always tell you about that is you need to put on your own oxygen mask first before you try to help anyone else. And so I'm on, certainly we're on the same page just about self-care. I think it's so important that we're mindful of that as therapists. And it's important that otherwise we're not going to do good work.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, because I love to walk and just listen to music, and especially being outside in the nature and just not being, because in a lot of ways where unless you have therapy, where sometimes I have therapists go outside and they're walking and they're talking at the same time, but unless that's what your practice is about, you're going to be in the office all the time. Mm-hmm. And so being able to be outside is just a refreshing difference. And so hopefully when this is all over, we can all get back outside and walking. Mm-hmm. And also, I think it is very important to take care of our own mental health and being able to say, when you're having a bad time in life, okay, let me address this, and I'm not pushing it to the side or ignoring it, so that that's still being able to take good care of yourself.
Right. And I'm a big proponent of every therapist needs a therapist. So I think it's, and that's, I know that's been valuable for me in my life. It's just being able to meet with my own therapist and, being able to just talk about those things and I think too, just regardless of how long you've been in practice, doing supervision every now and then, like you said, particularly for people that are in solo practices, having a way to bounce their cases off of other people, other professionals, and other people in this space to be able to, get that feedback and get that support.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's good for us to have support or get into an organization where you have that support. Around my area, I am in the Fort Worth Association of Psychological, I can't remember exactly all the words in the acronym, but it's called FWAPA. So it's FWAPA. It's out here in Fort Worth. It's really, really close to me. And we get together once a month. We haven't since March, but we usually get together once a month to do a CEU and have lunch together. But it's also a time just to surround yourself with other clinicians, and so that you can have those talks if you need to about, consultations or, what are we're doing for our best practices, and also just not isolating yourself to your office. And if you're not in solo practice, if you do have a few other colleagues, just not isolating yourself to those few places, also, nurturing other professional relationships.
Right. And that's, one of the things that I do here at the Practice of Therapy is I have some focus groups that I lead. And that is, really the whole purpose behind that is to get that support and just be able to interact with other people that are going through same issues, same kind of things in their practices. And so, I think it's absolutely, and, having mentors, having people that you can lean on is just so important for doing the work that we do. So, I love that.
Absolutely. And I just remember, it's Fort Worth Area Psychological Association. Maybe nobody needs to know that, but my brain was gonna.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You had to say it. You had to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get it. So, well, LaRonda, as we think about, I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm so glad you joined me for this conversation. What are some other things or maybe parting thoughts you have for people that are listening just about self-care, and just maybe also talk a little bit more about your book and how they can get that and that sort of thing?
Okay. So just for a therapist out there, and even if you're not a therapist, even if you're just in a helping profession, because a lot of times where people are in a helping profession, but they might not be a therapist, you're still helping people if you're, for example, if you're a teacher or you're working anywhere where people are depending on you and needing you for something right now. I would say just remember to take good care of yourself. People need you, and they need you to be a healthy, whole you. And unless you're taking care of yourself, it's going to be really, really hard. So, of course, and I'm talking to myself, when you can and when we are able to go back outside freely, get out there and do the walking if you can, the doctor allows you to. let's do things that remind us who we actually are in terms of who we are when we were not therapists, or when we were not teachers, when we were not helpers. So remember those hobbies and all the fun things that you like to do. Surround yourself with good people so that you do have that good social support network for when you need it. If things get too bad right now, I think just remember to reflect on what is good about what's going on right now. And I think a lot of times as therapists, we don't get looked at as the frontline workers, but in many ways, I see that you are as mental health professionals, because when everything started to go wrong and people started to become unemployed, or they had a few less hours, now they're having to deal with their kids more than they have to, and then more behavior problems set in because they're not getting those kiddos not being able to get that energy out of school. You're having to deal with that. And so I'm just saying, as a therapist, I see you, and thank you for what you do if nobody has thanked you. And so, of course, my book is called Be Still, Spiritual Self-Care for Mental Health Professionals. And it can be found almost at any bookstore. So it's at Amazon, it's at Barnes & Noble. It's not in the Barnes & Noble store, but what they'll do is if you order it there, they will print it for you, and then they will call you when it's finished printing, and then you can come in and pick that up. And so, that's it.
Yes, wonderful. And we'll have links to all this in the show summary and show notes. And so LaRonda, so glad to have you with us, and I hope have other conversations with you here in the future.
Of course, just call me.
Okay. Take care.
You too.
Again, I'm so grateful to LaRonda for joining me on the podcast, and I was so thankful to get to know her and have that conversation with her. As you can probably tell, she has the heart for caring and heart for what we do, and I think she is really one of those people that is such a leader in our professions, not only as a teacher, but also in the care that she provides and the things that she's passionate about. And I think that came through for me in the interview, at least. And again, I hope you will check out her website, gracepsychserve.com, and we'll have links in the show notes for that so you can easily access that. But again, take care of yourselves out there. And I think LaRonda gave some good advice around that for us to think about. Want to say a big thanks to our sponsor for the podcast, TherapyNotes.com. They're who I use in my practice. They're the leading electronic health record system for private practices and for any practice for that matter. And if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months of their services at no cost. And so it's kind of a no-brainer in that way. And I mentioned the session note helper at the beginning of the podcast. And the session note helper doesn't replace an electronic health record system. It's just simply a tool that you can set up within Google G Suite to help you quickly write your session notes. And I use it in conjunction with Therapy Notes, where I go through and check off what I did in the session. It creates a narrative, and then I cut and paste that into my electronic health record system. And it, at least for me, it works really well. And I've heard from a lot of other people that it does as well. And you can find out more about that just simply by going to the URL sessionnotehelper.com, or you can go to the website, practiceoftherapy.com, click on the cool resources button there at the top of the homepage, and that will get you to all of my resources that I've got available and keep adding to as well. So I invite you just to check all that out. So thanks for joining me for the podcast. Hope you're staying healthy and safe during this season, and I'm hoping that the transition back to normal is seamless for you, whatever that might be. And folks, be kind and considerate to one another. Just treat each other with kindness and compassion. It's how we're going to make the world better and how we're going to make changes in the world. And I know that that's for most of you out there that are listeners to the podcast, that's why you do what you do, is to help people, and to particularly those people who are struggling, who are hurting. And so just carry it on, folks. And I hope that you'll maybe reach out to somebody that might be being lonely during this time as well. So take care, folks. Thank you for joining me for the podcast. Do take time to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And we'll be talking with you again next week. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.